If you do have thank you. If you do have a question, please enter it into the Q&A box. A little bit about responsibility.org. We've been around for over 3 decades, founded in 1991. We have 3 missions: to fight underage drinking, to fight drunk driving and impaired driving, and also to promote responsible consumption among those who choose to drink. We haven't done all of this. We made a lot of progress, but we haven't done all of this work alone. We have a lot of proud partners that we're thrilled to work with. And we are funded by leading members of the distilled spirits producers. And many of them are on the call today. So thank you all so much for joining us. As I mentioned, April is Alcohol Responsibility Month. So it's the important time to reflect on our mission and our progress. Responsibility starts with conversations like this, with people like you, reflecting on being mindful about alcohol responsibility. And responsibility does start with each one of us. Our goal today is to continue to lead a lifetime of responsible, balanced, and mindful alcohol choices. And we're very thrilled to have you all here today and talk about some of the progress that we've made in the underage drinking space. I'd love to now turn it over to Erin Hildreth, who's going to lead us through this conversation today. She's our Vice President of Communications at responsibility.org and works very closely on Ask, Listen, Learn. And then we're also thrilled to have, is there another slide too? We're thrilled to have Julie Foudy joining us as well. Sports legend, she's on ESPN. One of our favorite people. I love it when she says, "Hello, sunshine." It just fills my heart. And she's been working on this program since its inception. And then Dr. Leigh, Parise, she's on the Education Advisory Board of responsibility.org and a co-founder of Classroom Champions, always also brightens our day. And then lastly, I'm sorry, I'm doing these out of order. Lastly, Steve Mesler, Team USA gold medalist in bobsledding and CEO and co-founder of Classroom Champions and former US Olympic board member. So we're thrilled. Again, this might be the most fun group we've ever had. Thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to Erin now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leslie. So as Leslie introduced all of our panelists, I don't think you all were able to see their faces. So I'll just have you guys say hello and maybe give a quick 20 seconds about your involvement with responsibility.org and your time here today. Starting with Julie, please.
I get to go first. Yay. Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. I have worked, as Leslie was mentioning, with responsibility.org and their Ask, Listen, Learn program for many years. And I mean, actually, I think, Leslie, going back to when I was actually still playing, that tells you how many years. We're going way back. We did a lot with the national team with responsibility.org and in this space. And now I am a mother of 2 teenagers. Yes, I deserve a halo, I feel like. 2 teenagers, 14-year-old boy, 16-year-old girl. And so this is right in my wheelhouse right now. And so I'm actually excited to learn as well as you all from our experts on the call as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And we're excited to have you here for sure. I'll pass it over to Steve next.
Well, I'm used to, like Leslie said, I'm used to going last. So I'm happy to jump in front of my sister here. Really, really stoked to be here. Excited to get to do this with you, Erin, and with Julie, and I guess with Leigh as well. As yeah, if you can everybody see her? No, probably just see me right now. Having started Classroom Champions well over a decade ago, we are now coming up on almost 10 years working with Ask, Listen, Learn and responsibility.org to work together to really think about it. Our partnership started from a place of it's not okay to just tell kids what not to do, but to help both kids as well as teachers as well as parents and families to think about how to be proactive with them and help give them skills and provide them skills and help teach behaviors that are going to give them more productive things to do, other than, again, just not saying what not to do. And that's where our partnership had started there, whether it's goal setting or perseverance, all of these things tie into responsible decision making for kids. So excited to be here.
Thank you. And Leigh.
Great. And it's good. I like that you should certainly always lead with, you know, that you are my brother. That's the thing. Obviously.
You're welcome.
Know
You're
you
welcome.
for. I'm Leigh Parise. I'm the co-founder of Classroom Champions. I have 20 years in education as both a teacher and an education researcher. I think I'm probably our resident education research nerd today, and happy to be that. I feel really fortunate that at Classroom Champions, we've been able to work with responsibility.org for so long, and feel really lucky that I get to sit on responsibility.org's education advisory board. You know, I'm really passionate about this work because I think it's so critical to arm parents and educators with information and resources so that we can all help kids make healthy choices. I also am a mom of 2 daughters who are really getting into the sweet spot for the kinds of conversations that we'll be talking about today. So I'll say, like Julie, I come with both, like, I'm excited to share, but also to learn today, as I imagine many of you are as well.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to give a very brief overview about Ask, Listen, Learn, and for those of you who are not familiar with the program. So as Leslie mentioned, we're celebrating 20 years of underage drinking prevention and 20 years specifically of the Ask, Listen, Learn underage drinking prevention program. So back in 2003, Ask, Listen, Learn was developed alongside a team of educators and organizations that you'll hear a little bit about in a minute, just who really specialize in that elementary and middle school sweet spot. And we'll also talk about why we find that younger age group, maybe younger than some of you all had thought about, so key in prevention. As Leslie mentioned, also, we're all about conversations. We're all about the data, and we have new data here to share with you guys. And ultimately, our job as workers at responsibility.org, as panelists, and as parents and caregivers, is to empower our kids to say yes to a healthy lifestyle and no to underage drinking. So it was 20 years ago that we really kicked off. In 2016, Ask, Listen, Learn launched new educational materials to go into schools with a sweet spot of grades 4 through 8. And those are videos and lesson plans, all free and open to the public, that teach kids what the developing brain does, what alcohol does to it, and what that does to them. And then responsibility.org is a listening organization. We're all about growth and evaluation and learning as well. So at the request of some of our stakeholders at education conferences, people really said they needed information about cannabis, especially as it's becoming more and more widely legalized throughout states. So in 2020, I know a lot of us were very busy navigating the pandemic, but responsibility.org and Ask, Listen, Learn, we were busy learning all about how cannabis affects the developing brains, and we created a cannabis module at that time too. So we're so excited. Throughout these many years, Ask, Listen, Learn has reached more than 171 million people in all 50 states, and we're just excited, if you're new here today, to add to those numbers. When I mentioned that ages 9 through 13, so that's grades 4 through 8, is a really key time for us to start talking to people. I wanted actually to have Steve pop in here and talk about why that's kind of in line with what you've seen in the education space as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And we've worked really closely together on thinking about this age group and how this works. And at Class of Champions, in the relationship that Class of Champions and Ask, Listen, Learn work together, and the curriculum work and the program work. This is an age where, like, we're really looking closely at the relationship between, like, social emotional skills and behaviors, and then academic outcomes, mental health, and decision making. So when we think about our work together, or just work in general across the spaces, like, how do you take mentorship and curriculum programs that help? Our programs help teachers create change in their students and themselves through the relationships that we and skill acquisition that we provide through the Team USA Olympians and Paralympians and pro athletes that we work with. But this is the age of which they can start to actually develop the understanding of, of right and wrong. This is the age, right around grade 4 is when, kids really decide what 4th grade is really when kids decide whether, when they get off the bus in the morning, whether they're going to turn left and go into the school, or whether they're going to turn right and not go into school. So that's the age where they can start to understand that decision-making process. So starting to approach them with responsible decisions and understanding the building blocks of those at this age is really, really an important factor of the work that we do. And ultimately understanding the attributes that go around, not just telling them not to do something. It's not just standing on the tee box and saying, don't hit into the trees. So anybody who golfs, you know exactly what happens when you say, don't hit into the trees. But ultimately being able to provide them the things that they need to do, understanding that making responsible decisions for your own health, success in life it's a goal to have. There's a process to accomplishing a goal. We kind of skip over that with kids, whether it's reading, getting an A on the math test. That is a goal. There's a process to that. There's sleeping well along with your homework and paying attention in class. And these are skills that kids can learn. They're not just traits that are bestowed upon them. And what do we see ultimately within our curriculum? We're looking at improvements in perseverance, in responsible students taking responsibility for their behavior, responsibility for their actions and decision-making skills. And we're seeing all those numbers are in the 70, 80, and 90 percentile for what teachers are responding with when it comes to the improvement of that. And that's how we know ultimately at this age, we can start here and give them this foundational building block, and then we will loop in the ask, listen, learn materials about brain science and what happens to the brain when it's ingesting alcohol, what alcohol does to those things, and give kids the skills and the tools to make those decisions for themselves rather than just telling them not to do something and abstaining, which we know doesn't really work. So that's how we've been thinking about it, Erin. Hopefully that's helpful for folks out there.
And Julie, I saw you wave your hand at me, so I'd love for you to chime in as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, to add to what Steve was saying is, I think as a parent, I thought, well, I see ages 9 to 13. I think, oh my gosh, that's way too young, right? I don't want to be having a conversation about this with my kids at 9, 10, 11, but it's not too young because it's actually preventative rather than intervention. And I think at that age, kids actually are still listening to what you're saying and maybe less resistant to you bringing this up with them. So I found it was most helpful if you could get to them at an earlier age, middle school especially, because they are, I think, still being in a situation, these kids, where they're having to make some of these decisions at an earlier age. And we have to, as parents, understand that and be preventative, again, rather than really thinking of it as intervention. It's something that is just a healthy conversation to have early on.
Yeah, Julie, I'll say I totally agree with that. And then I think one of the things that's really critical is giving kids information and tools and language and helping them really feel empowered, and then reinforcing those messages over time, right? So your kids are older now, but you started having these conversations early, which I think also gives you a platform to kind of go back to because you've been having these conversations now over many years.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this conversation. I feel like we could stay on this slide all day long, but I do want to share some research, and a little shout out to Maureen Delbeck on the responsibility.org team who led this charge and gathering this research. But in this research we just did, more than 2 in 5 parents do begin these conversations between ages 11 to 15. I think that that's so encouraging, and it kind of shows us that we're in the right spot, that all of us as parents and caregivers, the time is now, and we're going to touch on that as we move forward. I did, though, also want to touch very briefly on some of the partners that we work with. As Leslie mentioned, we do not do this alone. We don't claim to, and so many of our partners are so valuable to us. You can see here American School Counselor Association, AMLE, Association of Middle Level Educators, Shape America, which is health and physical education teachers, Discovery Education, who we work very close with, and of course, Classroom Champions. You guys might have heard of them on the call today. So Leigh, you're on our Educational Advisory Board, and I thought you could just maybe touch very quickly on the value of these partnerships and the value that we give to them too.
Yeah, I would love to. So I think really the Education Advisory Board is are folks who are across a lot of different organizations and who have a foot in many of these different types of worlds that we're talking about here, but have all different connections to schools and different levels of different ages of parenting. And I think one of the things I've appreciated about the work with responsibility.org is really trying to bring in as many different lenses and as many different voices as possible. So I think what you've got on the screen, the variety of partners that responsibility.org is trying to work with, acknowledging that kids are hearing messages from all kinds of different places. And so to whatever extent we can share resources and tools with a broader group, the better off our kids are going to be. And I think that the Education Advisory Board, we're really trying to help think about kind of who are the potential partners and how can we help to elevate the messages and share in thinking about, what tools educators might need and people who are connected with schools, so we can all kind of be on one team to help our kids make healthy choices.
Perfect. Well, I mentioned that we have research, and I mentioned that we're going to talk about statistics. What I didn't mention is that you guys are all part of it, and I have a pop quiz for you. So everyone who is participating, I would love for you to hop in and answer this question. You'll see a poll, and the question is, over the past 20 years, so since Ask, Listen, Learn began, do you think that underage drinking has increased or decreased? This is a statistic. This is not a, do you think, we ask parents and kids, do they think this is actually information? I'll give you guys about 5 more seconds. Here we go. I'm going, oh, everyone's still voting, so I'll give you a couple more seconds. All right, and I promise there aren't too many questions. I hope everyone's just going to have a little bit of fun here. No one's being called out for being right or wrong. Okay, so we're going to end our poll. Here are our results. You can see 37% of you said underage drinking has increased, 63 said decreased. Well, we of course have the answer for you. And the great news is that underage drinking is down. And not only is it down, but over the past 20 years, underage drinking has decreased 53%. So this is tremendous news. I'm happy to sort of report that it's surprising to some of you. But let's talk about that for a second. Maybe Leigh, I could call on you again to just talk about how maybe this does make sense.
Yeah, I mean, so I love a poll. I'm really glad that people jumped in and participated in it. And I think one of the things, as I was thinking about, well, what do I think might be the case here? There are so many different things that could feed into this, right? Like there are more different types of alcohol available. You might think maybe it will have increased, but there's also, we have so much more information, and there is a broad team of folks who are thinking about what can be shared with students and how we can help kids make healthy choices. And so I think it was really heartening, I think for me, and I know for others, to get to see the data about how this has been decreasing. And I think it just speaks to the efforts that have been made over the last 20 years. And also, hopefully, folks find encouraging and inspires people to continue to really be part of the messaging and part of the support system as kids are thinking about choices that they have in front of them, and what, which ones are the healthy ones to make and how we can support those.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think, oh, sorry, can I jump in, Aaron?
Of course.
And I think to Leigh's point too, like the support systems around, but also school, again, where, the 100% of kids by law, other than, places that do have like truancy and absence issues, that's where kids are in schools, and the support systems within schools are increasing, at such a like impressive rate, where when we look back in 2010, there was only one state that had, any kind of legislation or policies around like social and emotional, development and supports for kids in their school, in their school systems. Now all 50 states have some kind of interaction to support schools to do that, which means that schools are now becoming a place where we're actually seeing it as a fuller circle than maybe we did when we were kids, as a place for kids to feel supported, to learn, community schools, those kinds of things. And I think that also is part of it. To Leigh, I'm the same way. We think very similar, like the number is great, but why is it happening? Because if we can't figure out why it's happening, then we can't figure out how to continue continue those things. And we think about that a lot at Classroom Champions, but also just in life in general. So I think that is also like an interesting thing. And that's where, like, frankly, Ask Us and Learn has leaned into supporting these things in schools, because they've seen an opportunity to have that kind of direct impact there. And that's where, we've been really, proud to work with you guys on that one.
Yeah, I would just quickly add too that I think that number is fantastic, but the competitive athlete in me thinks that we should not rest on that number and stop having these conversations. The reason, to Steve's point, that this is down is probably because we're talking about it more. Schools are doing more around it. So that needs to elevate. Obviously, the rates were down because we were all at home during the pandemic with our kids around us. But as we get back to whatever normal is, they're socializing, they're out there. Like, these are conversations you need to continue to have as a parent. And although that number is fantastic, I think a big part of that is that parents continue to be open about having those conversations.
And I also think too, look, I mean, as a parent myself, there's a part of it that when you think about like the things you did when you were young, and well, am I going to talk to my kids about that and tell them? And I think ultimately, as a parent, realize that no, you're not being hypocritical if you say to your kids to not do things that maybe you did or you didn't do when you were young. And I think just you have to be able to own that and have to make that decision as a parent. So I talked to some others that it's uncomfortable. Well, I don't want to get to have that conversation because I drank when I was young. Well, more things now. Share the things with them, and ultimately it will be their decision. I mean, Ask Us and Learn talks a ton about decision making, building decision making skills and responsibility in kids. So you have more information about what this does. Sharing that with them is not hypocritical. In fact, it'd be hypocritical if you didn't share the information that you had now with them. So I think that's, as a parent, there's a switch there that you need to allow yourself to be able to make, to have these conversations in a real authentic way too, or an impactful way.
Right. Well, thank you guys so much. And we're gonna keep on moving. But I do want to mention, so we do have some more questions and they're going to pop up in a second. But I did want to mention that moving forward, this is the research that is new and that we're so excited to share with you. I can see the chat getting very active, and thank you to Maureen for mentioning that these are national numbers. And so our new survey asks both kids and parents questions about conversations that you'll see here that we're going to touch on. And of course, not just about alcohol. So we're going to show you some of these results today. And again, if you feel like having a little fun with us or don't mind participating, would really love your participation. So our next question is going to be a question in two parts, like I mentioned, because we did ask parents and caregivers, and we did ask kids as well. So here we go, launching. The first question is, what percentage of parents do you think reported having a conversation in the past year about alcohol with their kids? And also, what percentage of kids do you think reported having a conversation about alcohol with their parents in the past year? So again, I'll give a couple seconds here. I appreciate, again, I have a lot of numbers. I gave this same quiz to my son who's 13 years old, and it actually inspired a conversation about alcohol. So happy to send these over when you guys see the recording that we'll send out later today. I would encourage you to have these same conversations. Okay, we're slowing down a little bit on the poll. We'll end the poll here in 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. So you can see here the majority said 63% of parents are having the conversations, and 30% of kids. So of course, I would not leave you hanging, but the good news is the conversation, I know, the conversations are happening, and not only happening at an amazing rate. 93% of parents have talked to their kids at least once in the past year. And then, so surprisingly and encouraging, 90% of kids have talked with their parents. So we talk about Ask, Listen, Learn turning 20, and we're really focusing on these over the past 20 years results, and that's an increase of 31%. So Julie, can you talk about maybe some conversations that you have had with your kids?
How many days do we have, Erin? We need some days. Yes, I mean, as I mentioned, a 14-year-old boy, 16-year-old girl, so a sophomore in high school, an 8th grader. And so the conversations I have with them are particularly around, obviously, good decision making. I also think the other thing that doesn't get talked enough about is the ability to surround yourself around people who are also making good decisions, right? Like I always say, I just had this conversation the other day with my daughter, and I said, if there is ever a friend, I put air quotes, friend who, makes fun of you for turning down a drink or making a good decision, that is not a friend we want in our lives. And to really actively source out who are those people in life who are lifting you up. As adults, we do this all the time, right? As kids, I think it's important that they learn that skill set from an early age. Who are you hanging out with? What are the people around you doing? What decisions are they making? And are they chastising you or making fun of you for making a good decision? And do you want those people in your life? That's a conversation I have all the time. I just had my son the other day say to me, Mom, what did you do in high school? Did you drink? And to Steve's point, right? Like how much you want to share about that. And it was a different time and maybe we didn't know as much. And I said, yeah, I did. And here's what I quickly learned, Deck. And I was very authentic and honest about it. Yes, I did. I'm not going to say I didn't drink in high school. I did drink in high school. And here's what I learned. I learned that I couldn't play my sport to the level that was required because after I had a drink, I felt like I had a hole in my heart. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't run. Obviously, soccer requires a lot of running. I said, so that was my way of staying clear of it. As I said, hey, I gotta, it was my out. It was my strategy. I gotta be a good teammate. I gotta make good decisions because I have a game tomorrow and I want to be healthy. I want to be ready, all those things. And it's another reason why we advocate so strongly for getting kids into something that's a physical activity or something that they care deeply about, that there's something else that they obviously are thinking about beyond that. But those conversations are happening a lot. Those are just some of them. I'll spare you the 700 others, but to what we've been saying, I will continue to have them if I need to on a daily basis about this issue.
And hopefully, I know we have a lot of registrants from the education space, and I'll toss it over to you, Steve, but I know that a lot of times we hear that educators being able to give parents the resources to start these conversations at home. And again, we've listened to that, and we do have some of those resources on our website too. So maybe Steve, you can talk about how that is helpful and how Ask, Listen, Learn can shape a parenting style.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought the homeschool connection is something that we've worked closely on as well. But at Classroom Champions, we've realized that the organization itself and our programs and our curriculum are based around taking athletes like myself or Julie in the primes of our career, not the gray-haired has-beens like myself right now, but the athletes who are currently in the midst of these things, whether they're Team USA athletes like Alana Myers-Taylor, or whether they are pro athletes that we work with as well. And we leverage them as the basis and the anchor within a social, emotional, and healthy life choices, programs and curriculum that schools and districts can implement. But ultimately, we recognize to the parent side, which is who else is also enamored with when their kids are learning about perseverance and peer pressure and these kinds of things. The parents are also interested. So we have this like really interesting hook that is different and unique within programs and curriculum at schools that actually parents are a little bit more engaged with the work that we do. So we're able to send things home and allow those conversations to happen. And I brought a few stats along from our programming side of what the teachers are saying, which is that 96% of teachers said that these kinds of programs are helping them have conversations with their students about challenging topics. So I think Jessica had put into the webinar chat about, every time you have a difficult conversation, it makes the next difficult conversation easier. And you just have to go through that friction of getting through and doing and having that first one that makes the rest of them easier. But also what we're seeing empathy skills. 88% of teachers are saying the empathy skills are increased. Well, to what Julie's saying, you have friends and others who are, peer pressuring you. Kids build empathy. They will understand that by them pressuring, their friends, it's going to be, taking away from the success. And ultimately, we saw 79% of teachers that agreed that this program in Classroom Champions and Ask, Listen, Learn helps students better understand the effects of alcohol and underage drinking, which again happens when you can take something that is holistic enough that engages families. So it's not just happening in one classroom for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. It's happening when the kids get home and the parents ask, how was school today? And they bring these things up, or the parents have things that go home to them. So the parents know what's happening and they're able to have those conversations. And offering up, any programs should be offering up parents opportunities to ask open-ended questions, because it's really difficult to understand how to have these conversations. So I would encourage the program creators out there or the educators out there to provide parents those open-ended questions that they can ask about this, not a yes, no kind of thing. And it's okay. It's a difficult thing to talk about. I think just labeling it as that is totally okay. And then we want to have the tools to be able to do that, Aaron. So that's the way that we've been thinking about it and seeing some really, really great conversations happening that ultimately create something that kids are hearing. And Leigh mentioned the vocabulary, being able to increase kids and let kids be able to name it and have a word for it. Because if they don't have a word for it, then they can't talk to you about it. So it has to start there.
Perfect. And I'll switch to the next slide, but for any parents, for any caregivers who have not had a conversation with their kids, that's okay. The time is now. Let's go ahead and start, and we can maybe give you some tools to start, because you can see that it's not even half. It's 48% of parents feel comfortable or confident in approaching their kids to talk about underage drinking. And that's okay. Just knowing that it's important should get you part of the way there. Sometimes parents do wait. Our research has shown us 44% say their kids are too young, and 40% say that they're waiting for the right time. So hopefully the time is today when your kids get home from school. But also I wanted to really focus on the right-hand side of this slide too. And maybe Leigh, you can speak to this a little bit, that by having conversations about these things on the right-hand side, that starts the conversation about prevention and about saying no. Leigh?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you're sharing this, Erin. And I will say, I just put into the chat, I found as a parent that starting these conversations was much easier than I realized. But I think it's really exciting to think about these kinds of conversations just about prevention generally also being combined with conversations about things like goal setting and perseverance and healthy decision making. And I say that partly because we know that there's a lot of research that tells us that supporting the development of those types of skills from an early age really matters for how kids interact with the world. So, there's benefits about healthy physical choices. And we know from research on, social and emotional learning that focusing on boosting these other kinds of skills for kids will boost their achievement levels, will make them less likely to have behavioral incidents at school later on. And so just really thinking holistically about the supports for kids, I think makes a big difference when it comes to both underage drinking, but also all the other kinds of decisions that kids are going to be faced with, and helping them realize that they have the power to make healthy choices and that they really have the agency, I think is like setting a great foundation from an early age for them.
Thanks. And I'm going to move on to the next slide, but knowing full well that these things will continue to pop up. So we asked parents, and then we asked kids, in addition to underage drinking, what are you talking about? And we at responsibility.org always say kids don't learn in a silo. They don't grow in a silo. So the conversations should not happen in a silo either. On one day, you don't talk about healthy food choices, and the next day you say, today we're going to talk about alcohol. They just sometimes pop up naturally. And so we asked parents what these conversation topics were. You can see here the top 5 were cannabis, tobacco, healthy friendships and relationships, sex, and mental health and well-being. And then when we talked to kids, they were very similar, maybe in a little bit of a different order, but peer pressure was second. And then some of these other topics here were academic success, some other drugs or overdoses, which we've heard a lot about in the news, physical health, and social connectedness. So I'm wondering, Steve, if you can highlight how some of setting the stage for these good decision makings can also bring in some of these other topics both parents and kids are talking about at home.
Yes, those are interesting. I hadn't seen these. This is super interesting to see. I mean, ultimately, all these things are connected. When we think about, you talk about peer pressure. Resisting peer pressure is part of that is having a skill of perseverance. You have to be able to persevere through what your friends are saying to you to be able to hold the decision that you think is right. That is not only a childhood need of skill, that's an adult. It's an adulthood skill and need. When you loop that down to mental health and well-being, what does the research say? I mean, there's recent research that was published in 2019 that shows over an 18-year period, people with higher levels of goal persistence, which means that they were more apt to set a goal and keep on following it and keep going after it and try to keep going after it. People with higher levels of perseverance, very similar, I don't have to explain that one, but also people with positive levels of positive reaffirmation, which means that they were able to take a negative situation, maybe like peer pressure, and turn that into a positive. Find a way, hey, I feel proud of myself that I resisted my friends trying to get me to do this thing. I feel proud about that. I've taken a negative and turned it into a positive. All three of those things, people with higher levels of those attributes and those skills had lower levels of depression and anxiety. So all of these things wind up being connected. And like Leigh had mentioned, also, when you take those things in, whether it's, social, emotional skill programs, development programs, life skills courses or curriculum that are in schools, those things also relate to an 11% improvement in academic outcomes. So it's not just, learning about these things in a vacuum and saying we're going to go from math class to reading class to history class as if they're all separate. That's the great thing about teaching kids about decision making and critical thinking, is that it connects into so many parts of their lives that have like really, really important outcomes for them as they get older. So if we can instill this stuff in our kids at a young age, these things will, again, help them make right decisions when it comes to consuming alcohol, but it will also help them in school, and it will also help them when it comes to this mental health crisis that we're dealing with right now in a proactive way.
Definitely. And so I want to just bring back the Ask, Listen, Learn connection that we've been talking about, because all of these resources that we've been talking about, these conversation starters, infographics about 10 ways to say no to peer pressure. And of course, I think you kind of got there, Steve, the difference between negative peer pressure and good peer pressure, risky behavior. And again, there are all different kinds of risks, whether they're negative or a healthy risk. So Ask, Listen, Learn has information about that. Steve also mentioned the home school connection. And although we do have connection to homeschool, but there's also such a thing as the school connecting with the home.
Yes.
The thing, yes. So a little different
Communication to families and parents, the home-school. Thank you, Erin, for talking about the difference there.
Yes. Not every conversation is about alcohol. We're really focused on that, and that student development angle is so important. We haven't talked about it too much, but modeling these behaviors at home. So as a parent, what you're saying is heard, what you're doing is seen. So Julie, I thought maybe I could ask you to hop in about modeling responsible behaviors and how important that is.
Oh yeah, and I think the extra challenging thing is that with COVID, you were home all the time with your kids, right? And I travel a ton, so for me that was a blessing. And it also gave us this wonderful moment and recognition that, oh, this is a great time for us to be able to model these behaviors. What are they seeing? How you're behaving in this time, how you're acting in this time, how you're talking about it in this time. And not even just the drinking part of it. I'm talking in general. A lot of us had a different experience with COVID, but how are you dealing with something that was very hard for a lot of people? And how are you modeling how you're, as a parent, dealing with a situation like that? I think is really important for the kids to see. And on top of that, one of the things that we had a lot of conversations about actually over COVID, because they're seeing an increase in people talking about drinking and staying home and what that means, is our family situation in terms of, alcoholism runs in my family. And so we actually had conversations about the dangers of that in terms of passing it on, and that you're now predisposed to having a tendency for an addiction that you need to be made aware of. And those are conversations I'm having as well with the kids, which is, it's not, you can't do this. I just want you to be aware that this is what this family carries. And I know that, and you should know that as well from a very young age. And so those are conversations we also had a lot during COVID. But I think the most important thing that my husband and I talk about a lot is, are we sitting at the dinner table all the time with a glass of wine? Are we sitting at the dinner table having water? And what do we want kids to see on a nightly basis? And that's something that isn't a conversation. It's just simply a visual, and understanding that as a parent as well.
I love that. And we're starting to run short on time. So I do want to get to our last couple of poll questions, and also thank everyone for all of this chatter in the chat box. And if you have a question, please do ask it. And I promised my child, I would say this last bullet: kids are curious and kids are smart. And although sometimes we say, oh, kids these days or everything, kids are smart, and we can see they're making good decisions and they're starting good conversations. So we have to remember that too. And Ask, Listen, Learn celebrates that in kids as well. All right, so we're going to go into our next question. It again is a two-parter, talking about kids, talking about parents. So who or what do you think parents cite as the leading influence on their kids' decisions to drink or not to drink alcohol? And then who do you think kids cite as their leading influence? I get to see these come in as as you all answer. So I love seeing the numbers go back and forth and see who's the winner before we go in. I'll give everyone about 5 or 6 more seconds. Just going to scroll through my slide questions here. Okay, 5 more seconds. All right, we're ending now. So here are your results. Parents think it's the best friends, according to this group here, and according to this group here, the kids cite their parents. So I love this because it's parents. It's parents believe they are the top source, and kids think their parents are the number one influence on their kids' decisions to drink or not to drink alcohol. I think Julie said it best: if kids are seeing it, it's time to talk about it. I know that another educational advisory board member of ours, Brian Coleman, has also said it before. If they're seeing it, it's time to talk about it. But we don't want to underestimate that friends and social media do play a part. It's just parents still have that edge. And so I think that we could really take advantage of that. And 87% of kids believe that they have the information they need to make these good choices. So if that's okay, I'm going to go into our last poll question here. Just take me one moment. And that is about the decision to drink or not to drink. So again, a two-parter here about, are you all able to see there we go. What percentage of what percentage of parents think kids will be faced with the decision to drink or not to drink? And then of course we ask kids too, what percentage of them do they think would have to come up with their best answer and their best decision-making to say no to underage drinking?
I feel like you continue to just prove me wrong every one of these quizzes. And I like it. I'm fine with that. I like it. I like being proved wrong. So yeah, keep it going.
Any opportunity I have there, Steve.
Yeah, I know. It's great. Go for it.
We'll give you guys 5 more seconds. These answers are looking strong. And actually these answers are looking encouraging too. So I'm going to end the poll now. Well, now, and share our results. We're in the 70s here for both parents and kids. And I want to show you the true answer for that. Our research showed us is that 58% of parents think that kids will be faced with the decision, and 55% of youth think that they will be faced with this decision. So this is why conversations matter. Maybe you guys could talk about some strategies for starting conversations. Steve, I see you're off mute, so I'll let you go first.
Oh, no, I was off mute because I was cheering because I got that one right. I mean, I would defer to Leigh and Julie. I mean, I think that ultimately, again, we Classroom Champions is empowering, enabling teachers, and we provide them that. But I think I would love to hear, I know Leigh is, my niece is 9, and I know Julie's, kids are teenagers. I'd love to hear what they have to say.
Go ahead, Leigh. You go first.
Yeah, I mean, I will say at first, I want to say, I think these last 2 sets of polls, I hope that other parents see this and, like I do, feel inspired to actually have these conversations with kids. I think as a researcher and a parent, I'll admit that my first feeling was a bit of a sense of relief that the data say that, like, my kids, that they're going to listen to me, and I did a little happy dance. So I mean, for me, I think entering into the conversation doesn't need to feel like it is like, okay, we're going to pick this time and we're going to, like, today is the day that we're going to have the talk about it. I think for me, I try to build it into my regular conversations that we're having every day. And I talk about my own decisions about, whether I'm going to have a drink or how I'm going to make decisions about that, and encouraging them to think about the kinds of things that feed into that, to help them know that, like, it really is each person's decision and you've got agency. And then talking about the reasons, some of the things that I've learned from Ask, Listen, Learn, about some of the reasons, like scientific reasons, the brain science behind it, on why the drinking age is what it is and why underage drinking is not healthy for kids who are growing. So getting to just kind of weave those into our regular conversations. I don't know, Julie, about you, what you want to add?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I rarely, it has to be something really drastic for me to go, everyone needs to sit around the table now. We're having a conversation. It is, it's about, again, it's just weaved into making good decisions, having good instincts, understanding the power of the people around you, surrounding yourself with good people. It's those types of casual conversations. And part of that weaved in then within it is, and that, in these decisions around drinking, these factors that we have to address now. And so I don't necessarily, there are moments where you have to call the family to the table, but I really try and do it in a more organic, authentic way, so that it's not like, oh, here we go, mom's calling us to the table. It's just life lessons. It's skill sets that you're going to have for the rest of your life.
And for Ask, Listen, Learn too, remember it's a younger age group. So the earlier we start these conversations and the more we continue and instill these good decisions, just the better off we'll be. I do see a lot of questions and I absolutely appreciate them. I'm going to continue on, but I'll address them privately, because I can see your questions and I'll download them to get them at the end. But do continue to ask them, and if I can squeeze the answer, and I for sure will, because I wanted to just touch finally on just reviewing what we talked about, and that is parents, caregivers are the leading influence on their kids' decisions to drink or not to drink. As we noted, conversations are happening in droves, and we like to say as conversations go up, which in the last 20 years, they have gone up 31%. I think we saw underage drinking goes down, and that has gone down 53%. The conversations are not happening in a silo, so weave them into your everyday discussion. Overall prevention education works. We've seen that whether you start that work at home, whether it started at school and it's brought home by your kids or students in your care. And of course, we would be remiss without saying we have resources available at responsibility.org and asklistenlearn.org. And then we wanted to share the way that we're celebrating our 20th anniversary is a campaign called Take 20 with Kids. So we encourage everyone to hop onto our Instagram story and discuss what you're going to do. Take 20 minutes to set a goal, take 20 seconds to send a quick text, take 20 deep breaths to reset on your day, add them to the comment section. Now, if you want to chat it up, we can get some good inspiration. And of course, I've tasked the panel here with coming up with their own Take 20. So I'll start with Julie.
Oh, I get to go first? Okay. So my Take 20, because this is an ongoing challenge. And as your kids get a little bit older, and especially now that one has a driver's license, like getting them to stay at home becomes a little more challenging. And gathering the 4 of our nuclear family together at the table is with my son plays basketball, my daughter plays soccer, is just an ongoing challenge. So my goal is to somehow every day take 20 minutes around the dinner table to eat and to gather and to share. And typically we like to do that around a meal, but regardless, I want 20 minutes where you're actually just sitting together and talking, phones put away, no screens, that's our rule. And I think good things happen when families gather around a dinner table.
I love that. Leigh?
Julie took mine, but I'm going to say I'm going to take, mine is also about my kids. Every day, I'm just going to take 20 seconds to give them that individual focus, to tell them that I love them and that I think they are smart and powerful people.
That's perfect.
I
Short
love
and
that.
20 seconds. And Steve?
And mine is also around kids. And I doubled down on it, which was taking 20 days in a row and take 20 minutes in the morning with my kids. That isn't telling them what to do or what not to do, which generally consumes most of the mornings, but connecting with them and playing with them. They're only 5 and 1. So right now that's, them feeling connected to me and their mom is the most important thing for us.
Perfect. And my kids are 11 and 13, so I've shared mine on Ask, Listen, Learn's Instagram already, but mine is to take 20 steps in their direction so I'm not screaming across the house, and so that I'm actually having a conversation with them instead of just yelling at them. So 20 steps. But I did want to just, in closing, I see a couple of the questions you're talking about driving. And of course, those conversations need to happen. Just as a reminder, the Ask, Listen, Learn focuses on before driving. I mean, 9 through 13 age groups. So we can definitely set the standard and share values and set the rules and expectations early. And Ask, Listen, Learn, I think, can help kids and youth beyond 13. But those conversations about driving are definitely key and very, very important. So responsibility.org, we've talked about Ask, Listen, Learn. We have on parenting or on responsibility videos. I know that Julie's part of that. Responsibility Starts With Me is a long-standing responsibility.org program that just showcases some really cool videos and really cool people and how they recognize that responsibility, especially when it comes to alcohol, but not every conversation about alcohol starts with them. We Don't Serve Teens is a campaign throughout the alcohol industry and throughout the community that is a promise to never sell, serve, or supply alcohol underage. Parents, You're Not Done Yet is for those high school grads or maybe just those people going to college or back into the real world who are not yet of legal drinking age, with some information for parents to share. And Alcohol 101 Plus is a college and university program that is administered by those institutions to help young adults and college age students realize what alcohol can do to them. So I'm going to just go to my very last slide. Any of our panelists, do you guys have any comments or explanations or final words before we sign off?
This was great. The crowd on the chat makes it so much more enjoyable to be on these things. So thank you guys. I appreciate that you proved us wrong a whole lot of times, Erin, which helped us learn better. So thank you. And to the whole team, I have a lot of friends at responsibility.org and Ask, Listen, Learn, and thank you. It's a lot of fun to work with people that you really enjoy being around. So thank you for the partnership and thank you for the work we get to do together and for inviting myself and my sister and Julie on here today.
Yeah, and I'll just add, thank you for being curious. I think this is ongoing. I mean, I think as a parent, I still am wanting to learn more about this and see the data. So I think continue to research, continue to look at the videos. I was just watching some of the videos the other day, actually, as well. So, and I think that's another skill set we pass on with that modeled behavior to our kids as well, is stay curious with that growth mindset and how we can continue the conversation.
Perfect. Well, for all the attendees, whether they're here or whether they were not able to join us today, you will get an email before the end of the day with the recording of this session. And I would love for anybody who wants more information about Ask, Listen, Learn or responsibility.org, not only to go to our website, but reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or navigate through responsibility.org and Ask, Listen, Learn. So thank you all so much. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us, Alcohol Responsibility Month with us, and again, your curiosity and your expertise. So appreciate you so, so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
Bye.